spiritual center. So we're kind of in a weather advisory situation, so we've suggested for a lot of people to not get out if they do not feel safe to do so. So I am here, and Shari is here, and Tim, Barbara, and Rhonda. So that's, we're 2 or 3 are gathered. So I'm glad for that, but we're glad for you. I'm sure you're joining us today that would be here, and some of you that are joining us every week from different parts of the country. We want to welcome you today. We're continuing on with exploring the Nag Hammadi library and the Gnostic Gospels. So let me just remind you real quickly for the first few minutes that to me this is a part of the restitution of things that have been held back from the masses as religion began to decide to organize itself into an institution, which was around the 4th century, exactly around 315 AD at what we call the Nicene Council. And the reason for this is kind of interesting. The reason was because of groups of people up to that time who were really searching and seeking for true knowledge. And they called this gnosis because the word gnosis in Greek means direct knowledge. So they weren't looking to get it from leaders of religion. They were really looking to spirit itself to give them this knowledge. So they were kind of gathering all over in small groups. You know, the church at that time was somebody's house or some place out in nature where they would just gather together, and they would open themselves up to see if spirit would come through with some kind of interesting knowledge. Well, of course, that knowledge as it came through has to be filtered. And that's the thing about even direct knowledge from spirit, is that it has to go through the filters of our own consciousness. So that means the way we believe, the way we perceive, the way we see something is how it shows up in us. So that meant that there was a lot of groups that were not completely agreeing with each other because they had a different take. They had a different perception of what spirit was saying. And I want to say that the reason that it's important for you to realize that if you want to be a person who is a seeker of direct knowledge, you have to work on your own consciousness to get it to a level to receive it from a direct source. If you don't, then it's filtered down to a way you understand it, and therefore it's lost in the interpretation. So because of that, there was groups here and groups there and groups whatever, and it began to be challenging to what was happening, and that was the beginning of the institutionalizing of a religious center. So that meant that they had to do that, they had to make those who were the true seekers become heretics. Now, these words like heretic, radical, all these things are kind of words that I refer to as being relative words. I mean, if you don't believe like I do, then you're the heretic. If you don't believe like I do, then you're the heretic. So who's the heretic? We don't know. It's relative to you don't agree with me, and therefore you're wrong and I'm right. And of course you don't agree with me, I'm right and you're wrong. So that's kind of the way it is in this third dimensional world of time and space. As we know, that time itself is relative. Einstein told us that and taught. The way I give that as an example, if everyone is starting from point A and everybody's trying to get to point B, we all may experience that differently. Somebody that gets to point B may say, man, I got here so fast, I can't believe I got here so quick. Somebody going the same distance, the same time, can say, I didn't think I was ever going to get there. So everybody experiences space-time differently based upon their perception of the experience of that. So I'm saying all that to say that one of the things we have to do is work with our filter. What is our filter? It's our sensory perception. It means using the 5 senses. How I physically see something, how I physically hear, taste, and so on and so forth. We have to realize that that's the way we filter the world around us. So it's important that we make sure that we find a place within our consciousness that is neutral. That is neutral. And I've been saying this for years and years and years. That is really the purpose of meditation for me, is to try to find a neutral place in my consciousness where I am neither judging anything right or wrong, good or bad. It just is. Now, when you get into that just is, you could say you have found the I am presence. Isness is I amness. So I used to say that little part where they came back and Jesus was teaching the physicians when he was 12 years old, and Mary and Joseph went looking for him, and he said, but I have to be about my Father's business. And I said, well, the Father's business is isness. So that's the business that we're in, is to find the isness of ourself, the I am neutral place within ourselves. So once we find that, then we're not filtering anything that's coming through from spirit through the filters of the five senses. It's coming in its most purest form. And its most purest form would be within its own language of itself, which is called, we call spirit language. In other words, language has its own spirit. The ego wants to speak for it. You get that? The human mind wants to speak for it. It wants to interpret it. It wants to perceive it. But really, once you are a true seeker of Gnosis knowledge, you're in a place to receive it directly of itself. And therefore, it comes in through the language of spirit. Now, since spirit is kind of a mystical term, that would mean when spirit would speak, there really wouldn't be any language at all. It would just be kind of a knowingness in us. You ever had that knowing, but you didn't know how to even explain the knowing, but you just knew? Okay, well, that was Gnosis, okay? But when you run that knowing experience through trying to understand it, then you have to hand it over to the brain, and the brain says, okay, I understand it this way. And what's concerning there is the way you understand it is the way you've been taught to understand things. So therefore, you have pushed the source from within yourself to outside yourself as to what you've been told things are. So that's why it is important for us to learn how to find that neutral place within us. A lot of people have different names for this. Sometimes it's called point zero. A lot of people talk about point zero. Even in healing, there is finding point zero. Sometimes it is called the null zone, N-U-L-L, null zone. It is called sacred pause. It's what we used to call it in some energetics. Take a sacred pause, the pause of a pendulum swinging. You don't see it, but there has to be a pause somewhere for it to come back this way. But it was so quick the eye didn't catch it. But because the eye didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't there. Because if it had not been there, then it started going around, 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 it would have come back this way. So it had to enter into a null place. So I think that gives us a new meaning to be still and know I am God. I'll say it that way. Be still and know I am God. If you put it that way, you get a real different feeling of how powerful that quote is. So we're all looking for those places. It's also called, which I heard from Deepak Chopra years ago say, when I was learning to meditate back in 1990 through transcendental meditation, I was really having a real time because I've got a very overactive brain. Let me tell you, it doesn't stop. Even in sleep, it doesn't stop. I wake up and I'm doing messages, sermons sometimes in the middle of the night. I wake up in the middle of some kind of a message that I'm doing because that part of my brain is active all the time anymore. So I was really looking for something to hold on to and to grasp. And it was a very simple statement, but he just said, meditation is going between the thoughts. Between the thoughts. Because when you speak, whether you know it or not, there is a place in which that thought has become this thought. So between those thoughts is a place that you can slip through the thoughts and come to the field of consciousness in you, which is a state of isness in you. So we have to train ourselves to learn how to find these very sacred places within ourselves. So Gnosticism was actually, again, a group of people that were seeking direct knowledge, but it was really disturbing what was trying to organize, what was trying to institutionalize. And of course, they thought this is the only way we're going to stop this is just to make one church, one doctrine, one belief, and everything else is wrong and is heresy. Okay? So that brings us out of almost 2 centuries, almost 3 centuries, into what we have as the beginning of organized religion, which of course was the Catholic Church. Now again, the Catholic Church didn't start out as the Catholic Church we know today, and none of these religions we know today did not start out as they are today, whether it's Muslim religion or Jewish religion or Christian religion. It all had a couple of centuries of mysticism in which things were really more of connecting to spirit, to source, before it was doctrinized and captured into these different packages, I call them, of dogma. You know, it's packaged into something that this is what it is and outside of that is wrong or whatever. So you that are here and you that are here and listening because of the fact that you somehow have made it beyond those boundaries that was set for you, that spirit is confined within this dogma, within this doctrine, within this religion, within this church, and you somehow begin to do what they were doing in the 1st and 2nd century, and that's seeking for gnosis. Isn't that why you're here? Isn't that why you're here? Because you was hungry for truth. You was hungry to find something else. You was not being fed in the religions that you grew up in or the religions that of your younger years, that you just knew there was more, but you wasn't getting it. And you would sit there and listen to these sermons and go, this is not resonating any longer with me. Well, you become the new heretic of our time. And that is not a bad thing. I'm proud to say that if you want to call me that, I don't know that I am that, but if you want to call me that, that's okay. That's just another label the ego wants to put on us to divide us and to separate us. So this is why we are looking at this. We're kind of doing a paradox of going back to go forward. I know we all want to go forward. I know everybody wants to evolve. Everybody wants to go to the next level, but you can't do it until you are complete. If you've incarnated one time or 1,000 times in a 3D time world, and I leave that up to you. I'm not going to argue how many times you've been here or what your belief is on reincarnation, but however long you have been in this 3D world, you have to take the things that have been edited out from you, hidden from you, suppressed from you, has to be restored back to you. I don't know how to say that, but in other words, as you become an initiate to take the step to the next level, you can't take it with unfinished business, because you can't finish your unfinished business in the next evolutionary step. Does that make sense to you? So the next step is not to work out more karma. You got to get rid of karma. The doctrine of karma should be dying in you. The more you are identified with your spirit, spirit does not reincarnate of itself. It doesn't have to. Why would spirit want to reincarnate when spirit is spirit? It is what it is. You can't add to it. You can't subtract from it. It is the isness. Right? It is the isness of it. So why would you need to do that? So what part is reincarnating is a part of spirit that has changed its density, its frequency, Like steam changing its temperature becomes water. Well, spirit changing its temperature becomes soul. See? Soul is spirit on a different frequency. Just as steam, water is the same thing steam was, but because of the change in temperature, it became a more dense form of itself. Well, soul is just a more dense form of spirit. Okay? And then, of course, you have ice, which is the body. And that's kind of how all that kind of works. So anyway, I'm saying all that to say that we're going back and say, okay, you edited this out, you misinterpreted that, you cut these books out, they've not been available on my journey at all, but now that I'm poised to move to the next level, I need to go back and get what has been edited out from me so that I can be complete in my journeys in 3D and not cross over to work on 3D issues. I hope that makes sense to you. So I'm not looking for the next level to be my next lifetime. I'm looking for my next level to be no lifetime. I'm not looking for a new age, I'm looking for no age. So we're trying to get back to the frequency of what we call spirit. And in spirit, there is no age, there is no race, there is no gender, there is no beginning or ending of days. There is none of these things that have identified us in 3D that we're all working with. We want to be free. We want to be free in our race. We want to be free in our gender. We want to be free politically. We want to be free. We want to be free. But really, the ego's version of free is not free. So, to be free is to be free of the third dimensional world that you live in. And of course, for me, I hope for some of you that are softening up a little bit about Jesus and Yeshua, is that he's kind of the way shore, he's the pattern, he's the way that shows that I did it, you can do it too. And I really am very concerned about people who don't have anyone in their life, in their consciousness, that has done the thing they're trying to do. If you're trying to do it on your own without a blueprint, without a prototype, I think you're rambling around out there on your path. You've got to have a blueprint. You've got to have an idea of yourself as making it to where you want to get. And that's what these great avatars and great teachers have been to us, whether it's Buddha or Jesus or whoever. These are the ones that have shown us you can do it. But the trouble is, we took what they did and made a religion around them. And now we kind of plug into them without the experience they had. Everybody who follows unity should have an experience that Fillmore did. Everybody that follows Sights of Mind should have an experience similar to what Holmes had. Everybody who calls himself a Christian should have the same awakening and the same experience that Yeshua Jesus had. And even Muhammad. I don't know a lot about the religion of the Muslim religion, but I've read about Muhammad, and he was had a very, very powerful spiritual experience, no doubt about it. Before they made it into what it is now, his experience was quite phenomenal. Same way with Mormonism. When you get into Brigham Young and you get into his meeting with the angel and the tablets and all of that, it was an experience, no doubt about it. But those things did not stay the experience. But it was about the experience of the one person made into a belief system of the followers. So they believe in Jesus. So they believe in Muhammad. So they believe in Brigham Young. So they believe in whoever, Buddha. But those were the first flowerings that said, what I've done, you can do also. And of course, Yeshua makes that very clear, even in the translation, the works that I've done, you shall do, and even greater than what I've done. So again, it all comes back to experience. Spirituality is about experience. All right, so we're going back to go forward is all I'm saying. So we're going back to the first and second and part of the 3rd century, which was cut off. Now in the brilliance of that time, there were monks and leaders of those particular groups that had, because of their gnosis experience, had access to great wisdom. And by having access to the wisdom told them, take these things, write them down, and hide them. Make sure that they do not get a hold of these writings that you have that are direct. In other words, apparently, if you study this, you'll see that these characters had people who were scribes. They had scribes. So they were writing down what they were saying directly. And some of them are mentioned. Jesus definitely had scribes. David had scribes. And they were writing things that were being said directly without being passed down and interpreted, but in its purest form. Well, that is what we call the Nag Hammadi Gospels. Okay, so that means that those things were hidden until around 1945 of December, when some Egyptian shepherd boys were out looking for fertilizer, and they were digging around in these caves and ran on these jars of these scribed bits of information. And it's a fascinating story that how they did not know what they had gotten. In fact, they took them home, and the story is that the mother used some of them to start a fire in the stove. So some of them were lost, but a lot of them were not. And finally, and they didn't know what they had, and finally somebody smart enough said, wait a minute, you're onto something here. I don't know what there is, but there's something going on here, and that's why it is taken through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and some of the 70s before these things were translated. So it's really been in most of our time that all of this has happened. This is stuff of our generation. I want you to get that. Everybody talk about the young people, but I tell you, you that are 40, 50 and above, this is your generation of the restitution of all things spoken by the mouth of the prophets. Yes, this happened in your time. This didn't happen in Jesus' time or Paul's time or Jeremiah or whatever. It didn't happen to people who lived 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. This happened in the time you've been alive on the planet. And that's why I'm trying to get you to feel you're not by accident that you chose to come in at this time. You are the fulfillment of the prophecy of David, which was written in Psalm 78, that I see a generation to come that will not walk as their forefathers. That's why you couldn't. If you wanted to, you couldn't stay in the Baptist church if you wanted to. You couldn't stay in the Catholic if you wanted to. You couldn't stay in any of these religions that you grew up in because you did not incarnate for that. You incarnated for this time of the restitution of what had been hidden from us to be revealed and shouted from the housetops of consciousness. I want you to feel that. With all the turmoil and whatever you're going through, I'm not saying feel your specialness, but feel your humbleness. Feel your humility that you are the ones that are the first fruits of this harvest that have been called forth for this time. So feel that. Feel that in your spirit. Feel it in your gut. So these things were found in Egypt in 1945, and it just makes us realize that the Bible as we know it tells us very little. And even some of what it tells us is not accurate, but it has been completely translated to fit the already organized dogma of the religious church. So, here we go. So today we're starting on Mary Magdalene, the apostles, or the apostle of Gnosis, it's called. She is called. Now, I've said this before, that there are two female archetypes in Christianity, the whore and the virgin. This is why women have not found a healthy place in most monotheistic religions that are totally held under the power of a patriarchal system. And there's a reason for that maybe we'll get into, but there's a reason why to this day it is important to suppress the female, which has revived itself and stuck its ugly head up again. Really, we were making some progress until this more right conservative has come in again to try to take everybody back to a time that's called a great time. I just don't think there's any woman out there that could call the 50s and the 60s the greatest time. I don't think there's any people of minorities and marginal people who would call those times the greatest time. But yet, that is important, it seems, to get things back into order again as it was under the old system. So, Mary Magdalene is often misunderstood or overshadowed by traditional biblical narratives. Emerges in Gnostic texts as a central figure in the early Christian movement, unlike the repentant sinner portrayed in the mainstream Christianity as the prostitute. Mary of the Nag Hammadi library is an enlightened teacher, a close companion of Jesus, and a bearer of divine knowledge or gnosis. Mary Magdalene in the Gnostic tradition is known as an apostle to the apostles. In texts like the Gospel of Mary, she is depicted as the disciple Jesus trusts most, surpasses even Peter in spiritual understanding. Now remember, in some Christendom, Peter is the main figure that starts the Christian church. Now that's Catholicism mostly, and those of the Catholicism persuasion still believe that the church is built on Peter because of Matthew, I believe it is, 16 that tells us, and the church shall be built upon this rock. And he's talking to Peter. He didn't say upon Peter he was building the church. He said upon an experience Peter had, I'm going to build the church. Do you get that? So Peter had an experience, and Jesus had the experience. They had the same experience. And the experience was that the Christ of God has incarnated into the earth. That was their experience. And Jesus said to Peter, well, Peter, where'd you get this? You didn't get this from flesh and blood. You didn't get this from people. You must have got this from your Father. Well, I've had the same thing from the same Father, that I'm the Christ. And Peter said the same thing. And Jesus said, oh, upon this rock, I'll build the church. What's the rock? The experience that united them, that they were the Christ. So only those who have experienced themselves as the Christ of God are a part of the true church on this planet. Everything is not a part of the church. Don't you know they would love me for that? People think they get up and they go to a building and they join some religion or some group they are the church. No. The church is only made up of those who've had an experience of truly knowing their identity as the Christ of God. And what do I mean, the Christ of God? I mean the Christ being discovering the divine mind of the Creator that has been individualized in us and as us, ourselves. So, when Mary Magdalene comes along, Peter is not happy. The Nag Hammadi calls her the bearer of hidden wisdom. Mary possesses a deeper knowledge of Jesus' esoteric teachings, emphasizing inner transformation and direct experience with the divine. It teaches she is the feminine voice of wisdom, or Sophia. Now this really gets into some good stuff here, because Sophia at one point kind of screwed up a little bit. Yeah. As Sophia, she went outside the boundaries of the aeons, or the attributes of the true Creator, and while she was out there, she brought forth something other than the true God. But the good news is she has been restored back and reincarnated as Mary Magdalene. So she turns out to be the best thing that happened. Anyway, that's a whole story that if you're interested to get into, you can. Now, when I speak of the feminine, I'm speaking of the soul. So that means that's why the soul incarnates, because the soul is the one who has to have the journey, not the spirit. It's the soul, which became divided between the God of the material world and the true God of spirit. It is torn between the two. I would say it that part of the soul went with the body, part of the soul went with the spirit. So part of the soul is identified with our outer package, our physical body, while the inner soul still remains one with the spirit. So the division happened in the soul, or in the suke, or in the mind, is where the split happened as a belief. I mean, I've taught this stuff for 6 years here. It's just kind of coming together here. But where else would it happen but in the mind, of where the first question was asked, who are you? How could one part of the mind say to another part of the mind, who are you? That is saying, I'm not you and you're not me. Now that didn't really happen in the world of spirit. You can't divide, you can't separate anything. But in the soul, in a more dense part of the spirit, that was able to do that by using belief. That's why you have to be careful about what you believe. Belief is a wonderful thing if the spirit's using it. Belief is the most worst thing if the body's using it, if the ego's using it. That's why the greatest work that has to be done is in the belief systems. You've got to be willing to keep adjusting your belief system and raising the vibration and the frequency of your belief system to your gnosis or knowing system. So separation did not happen, but the belief in separation happened. And upon that belief in separation, a whole system of thought took place. So anyway, in some Gnostic traditions, link Mary to Sophia, the personification of divine wisdom, proclaiming the sacred feminine within early Christianity. It also tells us that the Gospel of Mary, in the Gospel of Mary, which is called, was a radical message. Direct communication with Christ, unlike the traditional reliance on external authority, Mary's gospel teaches the divine knowledge comes from within. So this whole within thing that's happened in the last few years, decades, is not new. You know, it's been new thought, new age. Wrong. This went on for the first at least 2.5 to 3 years after Jesus was here. That was the message. The one we're doing now was the message that was first here. It was all, the kingdom was within, it's all within, it's all within, it's all within. And then that got lost in the church as without, and all of a sudden God was out there, and everything, heaven was out there, and everything was out there. And what the teachings of the early that was within were lost. So the finding of the Nag Hammadi library is just restoring back to us how the teachings were in the early years that has been lost. That's why they're called the lost books, the lost teachings of that. Also, the soul's journey, the text describes the soul's ascent through realms of darkness, overcoming illusion to be reunited with divine truth. Now that's what we call shadow work or whatever. That is dealing with the part of the soul that kind of went down in frequency to the physical, mental level. See? And in that place, it began to buy into the illusions of the world. So all that has to be dealt with. So because of Mary's tremendous connection with Gnosis, there was a great conflict between her and Peter. Mary's authority is challenged by Peter, revealing tensions within early Christianity about women's role in the spiritual leadership. Now, I want to share something with you called the Pistis Sophia. The Pistis Sophia. The Pistis Sophia was actually a writing that was discovered around from the 1700s, 1713. It's a Gnostic teaching that had to do with the purity of God as a spirit, which is more unnameable, undefinable. Mary appears as a most understanding disciple, frequently interpreting Jesus' teaches for others. In other words, she was absolutely so connected into spirit that she could receive spirit in its most purest form rather than running it through understanding. It was direct. It was just direct knowledge. Now, a lot about her is in another gospel that's been discovered called the Gospel of Philip. In the Gospel of Philip, suggests a spatial bond between Jesus and Mary, symbolizing the union of divine masculine and feminine energies. Now, to get myself in trouble, which is nothing new, before there was bodies and the material world, there was no men and women, and there was no sexual encounter whatsoever. You don't have to do that in the spirit. That's something that comes in the lower frequency of things, of when the God of the material world says the only way that I can capture the true gnosis, the true Christ, the true spirit, is to keep creating bodies and putting it into bodies. Because bodies are like imprisoning it. Now, this is heavy stuff, I realize. Now, I have no problem believing that my spirit is imprisoned in my body. So therefore, spirit did not create bodies. Spirit created itself, or what we call individualized the spirit into many a spirits. I am a spirit. You are a spirit. But we come from the spirit. That's why Jesus said the Father and I are one, but greater is he than me. And this is why you got to be careful even with this level of revelation, because the ego would love to get a hold of it and make you a God unto yourself without a higher source. And people have done that, and I've seen the fall of a lot of groups I mean, the I Am was a great revival of people back many years ago that really started out wonderful, but they all got thinking that they were God and there was nothing else besides them but themselves. And when that happened, all kinds of bad things happened and it destroyed the whole thing. So please remember, even when you know your deity, know you're an expression of that deity, but you're not the source of that deity. Never let go of something bigger than yourself. If you do, then you're playing right into the ego's world. And that's why I like to say, God, source, capital G, me, God, little g. God, spirit, capital S, me, spirit, little s. God, light, capital L, me, light, little l. See? So Mary Magdalene often was misunderstood or overshadowed by traditional biblical narratives, emerges as Gnostic text as a central figure in the early Christian movement. Unlike the repentant sinner portrayed in the mainstream Christianity, the Mary of the Nag Hammadi library is an enlightened teacher, a close companion of Jesus, and a bearer of divine knowledge, or gnosis. Now, let's look at some things. I'm going to read to you out of the Nag Hammadi course guidebook a little bit to give you some thoughts on some things I've just said to you. Let's talk about the creation of the world. Now, nobody seems to get it, that you do not call this world created. The world has never been created yet. This world has been formed. Creation only belongs to the Spirit. Spirit is the only thing that can create itself. But the lower aspect can then take what's been created and miscreate it into a form that is different from what's been created. And that's why the Bible gives you the hint. First chapter, and God created man out of and man was created out of the likeness of God, both male and female created he them. Now there's no Adam and Eve there. There's no two bodies of a man and a woman mentioned in the first chapter. And male and female created he them and called their name Adamas. Never called her Eve. Eve and Adam do not show up until the second chapter, which is another recording of another so-called creation, which was formation. And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the earth. And because when he divided the male and female, he needed a helpmeet. So he took out of him and created the womb man. So the womb out of man became the woman. So the material world that you see is the result of form. In A Course in Miracles, the other term is called miscreation. My body is a miscreation. Don't you ever think that you're going to change my mind that my body was created by a whole, magnificent, wonderful God who could create an inferior body like the one I've got. I work hard to keep this body going. Think how much of your life is given the attention to this body. You got to brush your teeth. You got to wash the dirt off. Oh my God, you got to feed it. It's just something all the time because the ego uses the body to deter you from the real reason you're here, and that's to grow in consciousness and to raise your vibration and frequency to be one with the spirit creation of yourself, which is imprisoned in your body. That's why we go within. That's why we say here on Sunday morning, close your eyes and let's go within. Let's go in. It's visiting hour. in the prison house. Yes, every Sunday morning it's visiting time. That's what you should say. I'm getting up and I'm going because today I'm going to visit my true self in the prison of my body. And that's why it said before Yeshua totally went into the next fifth dimension completely, he stopped by and said, and preached to the spirits in prison. That's in the Bible. He's preached to the spirits in prison. It doesn't say what he preached, but I'll tell you what he said. He said, hold on, because there's a generation that's going to come that's going to raise their vibratory frequency to let you out of the prison, and you're going to become the body. You're not going to be the container of the Spirit. You're going to be the Spirit manifested, and that's called the coming of Christ. Tell your body Christ is coming. Tell your foot Christ is coming. Tell your gallbladder Christ is coming. Hold on. I know you're in prison right now. I know you're in a miscreated situation. I know that I'm dealing with sickness and disease. I know I'm dealing with ancestral weaknesses and strengths. I know I'm dealing with those things, but you hold on, because there will be a generation to come that will not walk as their forefathers. And when this prisoner is set free, then spirit will become flesh and I will be splash. Now, do I have anything to go by? Yes, for me, and that's Yeshua Jesus. That's why Jesus said, touch me. He wanted them to know him not as an inner Christ or an inner divine being. He knew that it had already come to the cellular level. That's what he couldn't die. The spirit body can't die. And once your physical body is made the spiritual body, death is no more. It's the last enemy to be put under your feet. That's what this says. Death is the last enemy to be put under your feet. Oh, I'm getting with it now, because this is my message that I've carried in me for so many decades and years, that I give you life. Death is not your friend. The only time death is your friend is when you are in such horrible shape that you need a healing by getting out of your physical body. But it shouldn't be your spiritual goal. Oh, I'm homesick to be with Jesus. Take me, Lord. I want a mansion. I want to walk down the streets of gold with Jesus. And no, you don't, because when you get sick and you're dying, you run to the medicine cabinet, you run to the doctor, and you run to the preacher to pray for you for a healing. Back to the... So, according to the secret book, now the secret book is another book of Nag Hammadi, our world came into being when the harmony and stability of the entirety, that's what they call the God you cannot identify, the entirety, was disturbed. Wisdom, the lowest aeon, now this is Sophia, desired to think her own thought apart from the will of the invisible spirit without the consent of her consort. That meant her male-female side divided up. And because this was important, because the male always represents the spirit. The female represents the soul, which is spirit at a different level. So she did not consort with the spirit, but had her own thought. This is where we get in trouble. We get in trouble every time we have a mental thought that we do not go ask the spirit, is this one with you? You don't want to think thoughts that are not in line with spirit or divine thought. Do you get that? Every time you have a human thought that is separate from divine thought, then you're outside the You're outside the realm of reality. You're back into the state of illusion. So let me say it. Wisdom, the lowest aeon, desired to think her own thought apart from the will of the invisible spirit without the consent of her consort. Her thinking produced another divine person, but because she acted on her own, the being that she produced was imperfect and ugly. Wisdom was mortified by what she had done. She called her ugly divine being Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth. And cast it outside the entirety. Outside the realm was formless matter, which Yaldabaoth used to make his universe. So Yaldabaoth is the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh. It also has other names too, and that's not a name that we're familiar with, but it's Yaldabaoth. It's also called Beelzebub. It's also called the devil. It's also called the God of this world, who is here to blind the minds and the hearts of the people. So there is a God of this world. And the God of this world is not the God of the spirit. And that's what we're dealing with every day, is the God that controls the world of materialism. Now, I'm not trying to preach you into something to believe. I'm just sharing with you some thoughts here out of this to see. But if you'll see how deeply this goes, and if it's all correct, we don't know much. And we're still on a very shallow level of what we think we believe. And the reason I know that is because I don't see the fruit. Let's be honest. I don't see the fruit of life in my body. I don't see the fruit of health in my body. I don't see the fruit of the things that we all try to claim here every week. Where is it?
It's in your teaching.
It's in the teaching.
It's
that's
in your
well,
may I offer that would be your fruit?
Well, it's definitely in the teaching of the teacher, yeah. Because Yaldabaoth had come from the entirety. So you see, this is a part of the true God itself. Now this is where it really gets challenging, because years ago I was reading in the Bible a line that said, salvation unto our God, and he that sits on the throne. And I thought, salvation to God? I thought salvation was for people. I didn't realize there was an aspect of God that had been lost from itself. Heavy.
Well, how would we be qualified to know that?
Well, it's in the Bible. It's in the teaching. That's it. We've not had the teaching. That's the trouble. We've not had the teaching. We just have not had the teaching. But it was there all along. My time up? No. Because it comes from eternity, it had a dim memory of what the spiritual world is like and formed this universe as a kind of replica of it. The world you live in is a poor replica of the kingdom of God we talk about that's coming. Not coming, and I see how we go out there. It's coming. No, it's coming out of here. It's not coming out of there. Oh, let me stay with it just a little bit longer. I got myself in hot water here, so. Because of his ignorance and imperfection of matter, the universe we live in is like the spiritual world, but flawed, fully of corruption and decay. Yaldabaoth, however, was quite impressed with what he had done, and he proclaimed, now here's the Bible, I am a jealous God. This is in the Bible. This is God in the Old Testament speaking. I'm a jealous God. There is no other God apart from me. Yaldabaoth's delusion disturbed his mother wisdom, who realized that she had taken the power from her and now ignorantly believed that he was now the ultimate God. That's when the God, the fallen part of God, now becomes the God, and the only God. Wisdom began to move about in her distress, disturbing the rest and harmony of the entirety. As we have seen, Gnostics believed that the ultimate God was remote and could not be fully known, that we can know and understand only lower aspects of manifestations of the true God, and that this universe was created by an inferior God of a poor copy of the spiritual world. And it's just there, people. Old Testament, a God who says you can rape somebody and then marry them. Is that who you want to worship? I mean, I can give you verse after verse of horrible things. Do you want a God that says it's okay to burn children and to kill them? That's in the Bible. This is the Word of God. No wonder Jesus says they know not what they worship. Don't you know they worship the devil? John 8th chapter. Go tell them that what they worship is my adversary. So people, what this is boiling down to is God needs to be saved in us. The true God, the God of our creation, the God that created us whole, the God that created us in its likeness and image. And instead we take on the likeness and image of an inferior aspect of God. So it's not that God's not one. We were right about that. We just didn't know which one. I'm telling you, the Gnostic teaching has changed so much for me. It's been another evolutionary step that happened back in 88 and 89 for me. And this happens about every few decades for me, that I go through a major shift and major change. And they're never easy. Every time I go through it, I'm kind of misunderstood. It's challenging. I got to think differently. I don't know if I want to change my belief system. I don't think this man knows what he's talking about. I just choose to keep it simple. God is one and God is good. I'm going to close in just a moment. This Pistis Sophia that I mentioned dwells in the 13th aeon, descending, and was tricked into leaving her consort aeon and descending into chaos. This is where chaos has come from in the world. She had her light and power stolen and not allowed to return to the place until Jesus ascended through the aeons. A heavenly being who fell from grace and descended into the material world. Her symbol was the eagle. Isn't that interesting that the eagle becomes the symbol of Native American indigenous people? And then I close with this Isaiah 40. I shall walk and not be weary. I shall run and not be tired until I rise as the wings of an eagle. So let us have the wings of an eagle symbolically and fly from the lower levels of the eagle's world of darkness and imperfection, and let us soar back into the heights of our creation, where all the things we're praying for to get done is waiting for us. Health is waiting for you. You don't have to make it up. Everything that you're praying for and working toward is waiting for you, for me. So, think upon these things. Ponder them. And we can go deeper as you want. I'm glad to repeat some of this and have a time when we're back together to have discussion. I am willing to do something differently on Wednesdays And for those who want to, if you want to stay a little longer after the class for a discussion time, I'm going to make myself available to do that for those who want to do that. And if you don't, then you don't have to. It's just,
Is that instead of the last few minutes?
yes. Yes, so you that want another half hour or whatever you want and can stay and do it and feel like that it's something that's important to you to open it up for a discussion, I think you deserve that from me, rather than just throw all this out in an hour and say goodbye. I think this is too much to do that. I think we need a time to let it settle, and this is going to bring up questions in you, and that's important. It's supposed to. You're supposed to have questions come up into your mind, and we want to help you to address these things, because this is a major shift, people. This is a major shift, what we're talking about here now. We've transcended new thought, metaphysics, everything that we all kind of have been in for a long time. Now, this is a big evolutionary step that we are taking, and the step is really backward to go forward. But I'm going to say this. 63 years I've been doing this full time, and I am not about to give this thing up until I find the real truth of this story that we call God. I refuse, because we're still got it mixed. I'm sorry, we're still mixing it. Even in New Thought, where we're still mixing a little of the man-made religion into it. There's still some things going on. There's still some things that need to be adjusted in the language. So this is fine-tuning time for those who desire to do it. Now, that does not mean that we will hold on to our, and this is important I say, because our fundamental place that we come from is more our New Thought levels. Right. I'm not saying let's get rid of this to do this. I'm saying let's build on this. Let's build on meditation. Let's build on realization and visualization and all these things that we do on Sunday mornings here. We'll continue to do that. But Wednesday, we'll be building on those things, so that don't we keep repeating the same thing over and over. I'm not interested in that. We are here to grow. We're here to be challenged. We're here to correct. We're here to open our eyes and see what we have never seen before. And I hope today you've heard things that, like, my God, I've never seen it that way. I've never heard it that way. That's good. Let us take a moment. Holy Spirit, don't fail me now. We're calling on you. We're calling on you as, excuse me, the teacher. You are a part of our mind that didn't forget. That's who you are. You're a part of our mind that didn't forget what creation was about and why we're here and why the true entirety decided to manifest itself in many thoughts and attributes of aeons. It needed to expend itself as love, as light, as peace, as joy, as immortality and life. These are all of the things that it became itself. And it's those things that we can know you, because we can't know you as you are, because you're the invisible one. You're the undefinable one. You're the non-local one. You're the one without beginning and without end. But thank you, because you have given us all these levels of frequencies of consciousness. You have given us a ladder, as Jacob was given a ladder to climb to the highest place to reach God. Every rung on that ladder is another level of consciousness. Today we may feel challenged. about some of the things that we thought we were settled and believed. And if we continue to be comfortable with that level of belief, I honor you to hold to that. But if you feel a witness and you feel something awaken in you that you feel like you need to know more about what was being taught those first, second, and third centuries, or decades and years, I mean after Jesus, then let us here at HeartLight be available for that restoration to take place. And now we take this again to the altar of our higher self. We leave it there. We leave it there. We detach mentally for overanalyzing, but we wait for Spirit to show up and witness itself in us. Wow. And so it is. Well, thank you for coming out and giving me some real bodies to talk to. So please understand how hard, not hard, I won't use that word, but what a challenge it is to find the right words, to speak words outside the box. Now, if I spoke certain words that are in the box, you'd had no trouble with me. If I would have spoken in the realms of New Thought, metaphysics, and what we teach on a regular basis here, we'd have had no issue. But I think we have to be careful about that we get too indifferent and too comfortable. We're not here to be comfortable. You know, this illusion of I'm supposed to be in bliss and I'm supposed to be comfortable. You didn't come here for that. You came here to be shook up. You come here to be challenged. You come here to grow. You come here to reevaluate. So thank you for coming. And you that are still with us online, thank you for being with us today too. So next Sunday is going to be a fun Sunday. We are going to be acknowledging Black History Sunday. So William will be singing, Sandra will be bringing us actually the message on Sunday, so I get a little break. And we all want to be a part of this.